Hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here today. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much, Dr. Dashore.
Could you please share with us Ollie's journey prior to BioNexus?
He was 3 weeks old and he was sick for the first time, but like he wasn't sick and then he was so sick. My husband and I would tell him like you are missing out on so much life because you're scared to like do these things.
Did you notice any changes in his fine motor skills, like holding a pen, pencil, handwriting?
When I would look up Pan's Pandas during this time, I had heard about that. And there was always a lot of things. He did tick a lot of the boxes, but then he also didn't. Within about 6 months, 6 months was when I really was able to kind of look back and be like, wow, we've actually come quite a long way in, just a short amount of time. When I'm like, hey, do you want to go do this? He's like, there's that panic isn't there anymore. He started asking like, if we need bottled water, then he'll be like, oh, I'll go across the street by myself to the shop and get it. Like he'll yeah, yeah. It's, like looking back and thinking back about where we were just a year ago and where we are today. It's just been such a blessing. Such a blessing. So thank you.
Welcome to the BioNexus Health podcast with Dr. Jodie Dashore, who holds a PhD in integrative medicine, is board certified in integrative pediatrics, an internationally recognized pioneering clinician, and author. And now here's your host of BioNexus Health podcast, Dr. Jodie Dashore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the BioNexus Health podcast, Autism Uprooted, where we discuss not just about autism, but also about PANS, pandas, Lyme disease, mold biotoxin illness, and many other childhood problems that can occur in children. It can often be invisible illnesses until we dig a little bit deeper. Today, we will be speaking with Carrie from the UK. She's originally from Texas, but she's been in the UK for many years. And we will be speaking to Carrie about her journey with her son with PANS Pandas and the incredible gains and improvements that he's made on a completely natural herbal protocol. Now, I have one request before we proceed. If you find this podcast useful, if you've been watching this channel, please hit the subscribe button. It honors the guest that you are listening to, who is the guest who is sharing their story, their journey. And it also motivates the staff to keep creating more podcasts like this for you for educational purposes, of course. And, all staff donate their time and expertise to make this podcast happen to help families worldwide. So please do consider hitting the subscribe button. It's free. There's no cost at all. And that would be incredible. It would be a huge favor to me as well. So let's go ahead and welcome Carrie to today's podcast. Hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here today. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much, Dr. Dashore.
Good, good. How is the UK today? Raining, sunshine?
It tricked us last week. It was such good spring weather, and now we're back to very cold and damp. So,
Oh, okay.
that's okay. It's okay. Summer's on the way. So,
Well, I'm so glad you're here today because I think it's going to be an incredible podcast for those families dealing with PANS, pandas, motor tics, and other issues. And so shall we get started?
yeah, let's do
Okay,
it.
awesome. Could you please share with us Ollie's journey prior to BioNexus,
Yeah.
son?
Yeah. So he was born via C-section. My pregnancy was really good. The birth it was okay. It did end in a C-section, but I didn't, there was no real complications for anything. He was 3 weeks old and he was sick for the first time, but like he wasn't sick and then he was so sick. And I tried to wake him up from a nap because it had been about 3 hours and I knew I should nurse him. I was breastfeeding at the time, so I needed to nurse him, and he wouldn't wake up. He was really lethargic. It looked like his lips were kind of blue around the outside. And I was a new mom, and thankfully my mom was staying with us at this time. She was a nurse. She's retired.
Oh, that is incredible.
Yeah,
Very lucky. Yes.
Very lucky, because a few days before that I had told her, how will I know, if anything's wrong? It felt like such a huge responsibility to be a parent that I wasn't prepared for all of a sudden. And she was like, no, you'll know. And so when I tried to wake him up and he wouldn't, she immediately looked at him and was like, we need to go to the hospital now. And I was like, no, I'll just try and nurse it. I'll try and nurse him. And he was just he was real lethargic. And so she said again, we have to go now. We have to go now. So we got in the car and we drove, and he ended up having E. coli, I guess, urosepsis. He was sepsis.
So wait, he had E. coli, and the only food he was eating was breast milk.
Yes, at 3 weeks old. So he was in the hospital for a week getting IV antibiotics, and it was super traumatic. I'm not gonna lie. But
yeah.
I had so many questions at that time. Like, how did he get this? How does this work? I don't understand. We hadn't left our house. Like, I don't know. So he had IV antibiotics, but they said after that, once we were discharged, they put him on a low dose of antibiotics for the first 5 months of life, because it was a precautionary, because they said either this is an isolated incident, or for some kids, this can be a chronic type thing that will keep coming back due to their, tubes, their urethra or whatever. So we had to undergo several tests within those 5 months. He had, like a catheter with a dye to see how everything was flowing in there. He had a contrast MRI done. And every step of the way, when they were inserting anything, I mean, what is this as they're doing it? And it's fine, which maybe it was. At that point in time, my mom was a nurse and my dad was the chief of police. So I lived my life just doing what you do, just doing what everybody tells you to do. And, but that's kind of when my anxiety started with everything, because I just wanted to understand what we were doing. Anyway, everything came back fine. And after the when he was about 5 months old, we went for his final doctor's visit, and she, said we can stop the antibiotics now and it's fine. He has no problems. This was just an isolated event. So that was that. During this time though, so here they get their,
Yes.
they get those
Yes.
at 2 months and 3 months and 4 months. And so he was on these antibiotics at this time that he was getting these. And I had asked them beforehand, like, he's on antibiotics right now for all of this. Like, is it safe to get these right now? And they just said, yeah, it should be fine.
Yeah,
And
it's always safe. No worries, no side effects. Please
yeah,
proceed. It's mandatory. It's very necessary, very protective. Blah.
yeah.
I hear you.
And to, I hadn't given, he hadn't been sick at this time. Other than that, he hadn't been sick over this time, but they wanted me to give him, Calpol or Tylenol or whatever it is beforehand. And so it just seemed like a lot of medicine going into him at once. Anyways, I didn't know enough to question anything at that time. But I did have just such an uneasy feeling with everything. I didn't really know anything about it or know why. And then, so he had those on schedule, up until 4 months, and then they don't get the next ones until a year. So during this time, because in my head, I was a pretty healthy person to begin with. Not so much with medicines or anything, but as far as food and working out and stuff, that's where my mindset was. And so for him, he, during this time leading up into a year, he was starting solids, and, I was thinking about like all the things that were going into his body, and, like researching where can I buy organic food and all of this stuff. I was just, what was going into him was important to me. And then also during this time, this was back in 2017, before anybody ever talked about, in my circles, no one was into natural health. No one was into herbs. I didn't know anybody that didn't give their kids the things. I didn't know, right. But my gut was kind of screaming that like, perhaps we should do things a little bit differently, but I didn't really know where to go with that. But at his 12-month ones, I decided to space him out a little bit. I was just going to do one a month because my thought was, he's so little. I just want to give his body time to recover from anything. So we did that for a few of them. And then after one of them, I think I don't remember which one it was, but he started 2 days later. He started, when he would sleep, he would do one of his hands would get so tight all night long. It was like it was just seized. One. Yeah, just one. Hand would make always the same one. Yeah, it was seized. I mean, I couldn't pry his fingers open. And it was like that all night long. He did that for years. But it was that mixed with... Was it seizures? I'm sorry. Was it seizures by any chance? Because it sounds like tonic-clonic might be. Well, I took him to the doctor to say, this was happening. I don't know. And because I had read online, it could be this type of night seizures that kids don't actually have during the day. So that was my thought. And so I was telling her about it, and she seemed, like, oh, okay. And then I mentioned a couple days ago, he had, one of his things. And immediately when I said that, her whole demeanor kind of towards me changed. And then she brushed it off. And that was, no, it's fine. Actually, he probably is okay. Like, this probably isn't a thing, because if it's not happening. So interesting. Right. Yeah. So during this time, right, the birth, etc., did this happen in the US or in the UK? This was in the UK. I gave birth to him here. Okay. So that kind of, to be dismissed like that, and to realize like, oh, there won't actually be any investigation, there won't be any investigation into this, like just to find, do we run a scan? Is there other tests that we can do to see what's going on here? Or is it nothing? That's fine too, if it's just a normal thing, but to not even want to be given the opportunity to like explore was unsettling for me. So then my anxiety got even higher. And because I kind of just felt alone with stuff. And then I thought, I don't know. So we stopped giving him, he hadn't had any more since then. So that was that. And then I kind of went on this, I thought, oh no, I don't know. Should I be detoxing him? I don't know. Like, how do I, if something went into him and now this is happening, is there a way to get it out of him? So then I started kind of like, I would just do things like sprinkling spirulina on, some of his food, or giving him, just, I don't know, like cilantro mixed in with, that's his amazing pasta sauce. Like, that works. So there was that. Okay. So then there was, about 2 years go by and everything is fine for the most part. In a few months before he turned 3, he started preschool and I had a baby. Same day. I had a baby on the same day he started preschool.
Started preschool. Wow.
Yeah. So we took him to preschool that morning. I had the baby that night. So that was a big change, lots of life changes at this time. And I knew that this was coming. So I wanted to be, he seemed to transition with all of it totally fine. He loved his baby sister from the beginning and he seemed to like preschool. So in about January is when he got a cough, but it wasn't a sick cough. He wasn't sick. It was just a constant cough. After about 2 months, I did take him to a doctor because I thought, what is this? And as we were driving there, I was counting in between each cough was 3 seconds in between. And it was
wow.
But it wasn't,
3 seconds. And wait, sorry, how old was he by this time? He was 4?
No. He had just turned 3.
Just turned 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he started preschool in September. And then the following January, a few months later, it was his 3rd birthday. So, so this cough lasted for 6 months. It was very disruptive. Sometimes it would be every 2 minutes. Sometimes it was every 2 seconds. And it seemed like a habit. He wasn't sick. He wasn't having postnasal drip. It wasn't that. It was just a constant. He was fine in himself. But this cough was crazy. I took him to salt caves. I would put a nebulizer up to him. We saw a homeopath. The preschool was like, this cough is crazy. It could be asthma. You need to take him to the GP. So I did. The GP said, it doesn't really sound like asthma, but we don't know what else it could be. So they gave us an inhaler, which
steroids.
I don't think it was a steroid inhaler. I think it was like a step down from that.
Yeah.
We used it twice.
Albuterol, probably.
Probably.
The albuterol inhaler, that's what they gave you. It's so interesting that you notice it was more like a habit, slash possible motor tic.
Yeah. Ticks weren't really, the tick part, I had never heard of them. That wasn't really on my radar at that time. But looking back, I mean, I have a binder of like every like cough, cold, flu, everything from the beginning for my kids. So it's been so interesting once I started working with you and I like put together a chronological like time, just going back through all that and seeing like, wow, because when you're in the thick of things, you can't all piece it together. But so that cough was the first thing. Then about 2 months after that, so this was about March, he started saying that he couldn't take a deep breath. And this was, he was newly 3. And this was, I would see him like, and I would say, what are you doing? He's like, I can't take, he couldn't get a deep breath. So I don't know if that's like an air hunger type thing, but that was a big thing for him.
Did he have any insect bites, mosquito bites, spider bites, anything since birth that you can recall?
Definitely no.
Hiking, walking in the woods?
No. So this was a thing that I asked people about here because in the UK, I never hear people talk about ticks or anything. Like I've asked people like, do y'all get ticks here? And people say like, maybe if you're like more north in the Midlands or something, but we're outside of London. And I've never found a tick on my kids. I've never known them to have a spider bite. They have had like the odd mosquito bite, but coming from Texas where there was, I was eaten alive by mosquitoes as a kid and I just don't notice them here, like I don't. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they've never had a spider bite, but there's never been any bite that has caused me to be like, ooh, what's happened here? As a kid, I had a tick on me. I can remember once. I don't remember anything, coming from that, like getting sick afterwards or a rash or anything. But yeah, it was common in Texas, mosquito bites and
Oh, yeah, yeah, it
ticks.
would be. Yeah. Yeah. Southern states, you would have that. But the thing is, if you have a really good immune system,
Mm.
you don't get that. And then it transmits in utero to the kids.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, which is crazy. I never knew, I never knew till meeting you. So yeah, so he had this air hunger.
Air hunger.
I had like a little oxygen monitor. I mean, I had all the things. I was like, if I won't be helped by doctors here, I have to be my own doctor. I mean, I kind of, anyway, I would have an oxygen monitor. He'd say he couldn't breathe and I would take his oxygen and it was fine, so it was just, but I've had this before, like I knew what he was talking about because I've had to where I feel like I can't take a deep breath. It used to give me anxiety, which didn't make it any better, but I could kind of, in my adult logical brain, just forget about it and move on or something, or yawn. So I try and teach him like, try to yawn and then you can get that satisfying breath. So then I thought, is this like hereditary? This is a weird thing to pass down to your child, anyways, so that was January to March. We were dealing with couldn't take a deep breath and the cough. So then April, he had off for about a month from Easter. No cough at all. And then at the end of that, he got sick with like a really bad sore throat and a high fever. But it lasted a couple of days and then he was fine. Then he started back at preschool in April and the cough came back.
He was being exposed to pandas triggers, could be mold,
Yeah.
could be strep, staph, other infections encountered in a preschool. I mean, preschools are usually cesspools of issues, right? Disease
Yeah.
and, common childhood issues.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Okay.
Yeah. That would, because also then later on when he had the cough the whole time until July, and then we went to Texas for 5 weeks, no cough.
No
Came
cough.
back, cough. So in my head, I was like, okay, is there like a trigger or something at like a physical trigger, or is this emotional? Like I have a psychology degree. I'm all about like, how do people think, So I'm like, oh, is this just super emotional for him? Every time he goes there, he's triggered, So I was like in these two minds, like what, does he not feel safe there? And this is the way he's trying to cope with it. I didn't know, but he was only, we lived across the street from the preschool. He seemed like he loved going in there. He had a great time. Like, so it was hard to kind of think, he hates it there. I was a stay-at-home mom. If it would have been terrible, I would have just brought him out, but anyway, so he also right before preschool ended that year, he came out like he's never had skin issues, but he came out with like these big red eczema looking patches on his bum cheek. It was very, and so that was random. It lasted about a month and then it went away. He's never really had other skin issues or anything.
You had mentioned he had the dry peeling skin on his feet.
Yes. So that was in 20. Okay. So,
he was a bit older by then.
He was a bit older by then.
Right.
That was in
that's fine.
2020. So we went to Texas. Everything was fine. We came back. He started his new year preschool in September. And then his eye tics started to develop. So it was just like, hard blinks over and over and over. I took him to the optometrist thinking, is it dry eye? She did a dry eye test and it wasn't that. No, at this point, no. I had been Googling. I would ask people, like, this is happening. And everybody was just like, I don't know. So I felt really alone. I did make a doctor's after the optometrist said there's nothing wrong with his eyes. Then she said maybe you should make a GP appointment. And I started thinking, okay, so I do that. So I did, and I told them, I tried to tell him he's been doing this thing. Is this thing in my head? It was like a seizure type of thing. My sister-in-law, she had epilepsy for a while. She doesn't have it anymore. So I thought, oh, maybe this is somehow hereditary and this is all just kind of linked to the same type of thing. So I made a doctor's appointment for him, which was in the beginning, right after he turned 4 is when we got that appointment with a pediatric neurologist. And I was excited. Okay, somebody that I can ask these questions to, because I had been Googling this, and then I found the word tic, for the first time, and Tourette's, and I was like, oh, okay, so tics, this is a thing where they keep doing these things over and over, and they don't, really mean to. It's, so. And then I read, fleeting tics. So I thought, okay, maybe these are fleeting tics that will just go away. But then if they last over a year and there's more than one, then it's not fleeting tics anymore. It's a thing. Right. So we went to I had that appointment right after he turned 4. I showed him videos. I was telling him, because I had recorded him doing the cough, doing the eye blinking, his hand things, because by then this had been 4 years now or 3 years now that he had, has this tight fist. And we were in there for about 10 minutes and he just told me, yeah, he can walk and talk. He's fine. Because he was in there with me as well. And he is, when he wasn't doing the tics, he was just your average 4-year-old boy. But in my head, this last year, like, it started, he had nothing, then he had a cough, now he has coughs and hard eye blinking, and it just felt like we were on a slow progression and nobody was taking me seriously. So he told me, he can walk and talk, he's fine.
And he's fine. He also had that seizure-like, sleep seizure-like, the hand fisting. He also had what else did you mention? The cough was one, eye blinking was one. So things kept progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like no one thought about the long-term effects of all of these, right? Physiological, like, I mean, a seizure is a misfiring in the brain. So just because you have a child who is mostly neurotypical, and the big reason for that would be, right, because you stop the things, right?
I stopped
doing the things that you stop doing, and that's a big part.
I went pretty crazy after when he was 1. I changed all of our cooking.
Yes, of course, yes. And
got,
detoxifying.
Yes. I clean with vinegar, and baking soda. I made my own soap for a long time.
You made your own soap. That sounds like my mom, well, Carrie, we're the same tribe, lady.
Yeah. I mean, I went all in. I had fun doing it. I don't get this became like my passion and my hobby. I was a stay-at-home mom in a country where I barely knew anybody because we had, I had moved here right when I got pregnant with Ollie. So I didn't have lots of friends. I was just making stuff, and I got magnesium back then. So he was always taking magnesium bath every day. Like, I was just doing the things that I could do, the easy, just one thing at a time. We started eating organic. He was dairy free the first probably 5 years of his life.
That's excellent.
Because
you were as well, right? See that's pretty significant.
Yeah, for me, it just made, I noticed in college when I had milk, it made me bloated. So I stopped drinking milk. That just seemed, and then I never drank it again. So it, yeah. So anyway, okay. So that appointment was in January. Was it in January? Yeah. Right around this time as well, though, let me see, when was it? That October, though. October, yes. That October and January, he got croup for the first time, and then he got croup again. So this was like back, and croup was like his thing. This is what he got a lot of in these younger years. And then in February, he got the flu, and he had 104. So he had just turned 4. He had 104 fever. He couldn't walk. He was laying in bed. He needed to go to the bathroom, and he tried to stand up, and his legs wouldn't work. And so we carried him to the bathroom, and I just thought he had body aches and he was weak. And that was, he just kept saying, I can't walk.
So he was literally unable to walk.
I mean, at that point. But I thought that day that he had the super high fever, I thought that he was just really weak and he felt bad and he didn't want to walk. So we carried him. But then the next day, his fever was gone. He felt good, but he crawled around our house for 2 days. He said that the back of his knees hurt really bad. And I mean, he was laughing at himself as he was like, look, I'm crawling like a baby. So for him, it wasn't, he thought it was funny, but also, I mean, I kept saying like, are you joking? Or like, can you actually not walk? And he was like, my legs just hurt really bad. So he wasn't, so he crawled around for 2 days. I just thought that was so weird. But then after the 2 days, then he gained his strength back. But it was just so odd because he was fine. He had this 24 hours of sickness and intense sickness. That was the highest fever, he had ever had. But then, yeah, to be fine and not be able to walk for 2 days after that because his knees hurt really bad. So there was that. And then by May, June, so that was in February. And then by May, June, it really, all the tics just really ramped up from there. So this was 2020. We had gone into lockdown, which was the best time of my little kids' lives. Like they didn't have to, it was great weather here. We were just at home all day with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they were living their best life. But I have these videos I was just looking at earlier from this time. He would sit on the couch and, if he was watching a show, his body was just so restless. He would like suck his tummy in real far and then let it out. And then, his hard eye blinking and doing that. And he just, it's not fidgeting like he needed to do something. His brain seemed calm while he was watching, his show, but he just was doing all of these movements. So there was that. And then that's the time when his feet started peeling. Like they didn't itch, they didn't hurt. He would have these huge cracks like in his toe, where his toe meets his foot, and then just this peeling skin.
It would start peeling. Yes, that is seen with stealth strep infections.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yes.
So that was interesting.
What about frequency of urination or vomiting? That
came for about 5 months over this year. He had to pee all the time. I mean, it would be every 5 minutes. He didn't actually pee when he went to the bathroom. It didn't hurt. I bought strips to see if he had a urinary tract infection. None of that. But he had this constant urge to pee. And that lasted a while, and like half a year, and then it went away. So there's a lot going on in 2020.
So it went away. So he's had this waxing and waning, the sawtooth recovery or the sawtooth progression of the disease, pandas. That is what it's known for being
like
up and down, lots of ups and downs, both in development of the disease, as it gets worse because it goes misdiagnosed, and in recovery as well. We will speak about Did you also mention separation anxiety?
Yes. So in the beginning, it was, we were because of COVID and because we started homeschooling that year. So we are a family who is always together. um, but he never had separation anxiety before. Like I said, he would go into preschool totally fine, happy kid. In about when he was about 6 or 7 ish, around, it must have been around 6 years old, he started developing separation anxiety, is what I call it. I mean, the thought of me dropping him off somewhere would send just panic through him. Which, a lot of people were like, oh, it's because you homeschool him. But all of our friends are homeschooled and all of their kids. I mean, a lot of them, prefer to be with their parents, but the level of panic that Ollie was experiencing is not what I saw any of the other home ed people experience. So that never sat right with me, that it's just because he was homeschooled, because we also our life was with other people. But I mean, it got to a point here at the end, before I got in contact with you, we had moved to a much smaller house, but all of our houses here are 2-story. So he's 9 at this point, and I would just go, he'd be in the living room with his sister and brother. I'd go upstairs to put clothes away, and he would notice that I wasn't down here, and all of a sudden, mom, just checking, and I'd be like, I mean, the panic in his voice, and I'd say, upstairs, Ollie, and he'd be like, oh, just checking where you are. And then, I'd come down, be in the kitchen, go back upstairs, mom, I mean, it was, and then I'd come down, and the thing is it didn't, his fears to me seemed irrational. They didn't match what was going on in the situation. We could be at the park and he would be running off playing with his friends far away from me and be totally fine. But when we're inside our house and I go upstairs, it's this panic all of a sudden. It was crazy. It was crazy. And it was all the time. It was all throughout the day. It wasn't just like a one-time thing. So
Did you notice any changes in his fine motor skills, like holding a pen, pencil, handwriting?
no, I didn't. I
Okay.
didn't notice any changes with that. I feel like when I would look up pandas during this time, I had heard about that. And there was always a lot of things. He did tick a lot of the boxes, but then he also didn't, like
Exactly. Right.
he didn't have any behavioral issues. He's who he is a pretty flexible, easygoing kid. And he's also weirdly coordinated and agile. Like he's always been like that from a toddler, like even with he's a Lego builder, like that's his thing. So he's always had pretty good handwriting, and even though he doesn't like writing, but I didn't notice any loss of skills,
Okay.
just emotionally.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, not everybody gets every single symptom, but he had, pretty
Mhm.
textbook pandas at that point,
Yeah.
considering everything that you've mentioned so far. So can you talk about how did you hear about BioNexus Health? How did you hear about me?
Yes. So by this point, he was 8, almost 9. And I was getting, it had been 6 years that I had been on this healing journey for him. I got really good at treating acute illnesses using herbs and homeopathy and supplements and all this stuff. I love that stuff. I started to realize that he flares. So when he gets sick, I can get him to a good point over, 4, 5, 6 months, to where the extremeness of the tics and the anxiety was settling down. but then he would get sick and it would all just come back. And so I realized, like, we're dealing with flares here. I don't know from what, I don't know how, I actually don't, and I realized I don't actually know what I'm doing. I had just been doing lots of trial and error for years. So we started a home ed class, and I had just gotten to a point where I was thinking, like, I want to work with somebody. We're at a point now where I would like some testing done, or, just, I need someone to hold my hand through all of this, because I don't know what I'm doing. And I met a mom who has worked with you, and we met at a homeschool class, and so we were talking about our different kids' experiences, and it was like a breath of fresh air talking to her, because everybody that I had talked about these things before, especially my friends, they see Ollie, and for the most part, he can appear like a normal kid. So everybody would tell me a lot of times, like, oh, it's fine. These are just like kids do weird things. And in my head, like, this wasn't right. It just reminded me of like a check engine light on a car, like is it still running? Yes. But if you don't do something about it, it's going to stop running,
I
So
love that analogy. And
yeah.
I absolutely love that check engine light on car analogy, because yes, sooner or later, things will crash if we don't interfere and intercept
Yeah.
Pan's autoimmune process.
Yeah, because that's what it felt like, as he went from this like really happy-go-lucky kid to a really fearful one who was scared to do any. He got to a point where he was really just too nervous and scared and full of anxiety to do anything. And my husband and I would tell him, like, you are missing out on so much life because you're scared to like do these things. But it wasn't just like, some kids you can give them a push. His was panic though. And so it felt like if we pushed too hard, it was going to create some level of trauma. And, I don't know. So anyway, I met a mom who worked with you, and she was just talking to her about what I was going through with Ollie, and her being able to be like, yes, and just tell me all, she's so wise. Just tell me all of the things, like, this is why, and the basal ganglia, all the things.
Amazing, right?
I was like, yes, this is like, and so she told me about BioNexus, and I went on your website that night, and I think I spent 2 weeks listening to all of your podcasts.
Oh my goodness.
And,
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
because
wonderful.
it's it can be nerve-wracking to try to figure out who to even work with, because I feel like in the natural health space there's so, it's pretty saturated with natural health practitioners these days. And I just wanted to work with somebody that really knew what they were talking about, that could tell me why these things, and wouldn't just be like, oh, just parasite cleanse. Oh, just do this, like a blanket thing, like, this is just what we need to do, just this one thing, and it will all be fine. I just really loved your podcast, and, listening to the parents and just getting the why behind the symptoms felt life-changing.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad we found each other, because just like you, I'm also a Pans Pandas mom. So we've lived it.
Yeah. Yes. Which,
Sometimes.
that's been helpful to, I remember our first appointment, and I was talking to you just filled with tears, because to say something and not be brushed off, and to be like, yes, I've experienced that too, was such a weight off my shoulders, because it just made, I had gone with this feeling of being like, I know I'm not crazy, but also I kind, people often make me feel like I'm just reading too much into things, and it's not that big of a deal. And so it was hard trying to be like, oh, well, is it maybe not a big deal? It feels like a big deal, but.
We ran a lot of labs, since it is a completely customized protocol. Now, with the labs, I recall we found some heavy metals, we found Lyme disease, Bartonella, Mycoplasma, Streptococcus, viruses. We found the PANS pandas panel with many neuroautoimmune antibodies, right, firing at his brain. We also found mold toxins, right? We found gut inflammation, some digestive issues. His microbiome wasn't that great. And then we started him on a herbal protocol with herbals. And here we are today. What changes have you seen in Ali after 6 years of everything that he's been through?
Oh, man, it's been, I just feel like, well, I was talking about this with my husband because I asked him, I was like, do you think I'm such an optimist, and he's the opposite, so we balance each other out really good. And I feel like for me, I can oftentimes get so hopeful about something that I'll see, what I want to see. And so I always have to bounce it off of him because he'll snap me right back to reality, like, so when I asked him, we were probably 7 months in, 6 or 7 months in, I was like, have you noticed, like, can you notice any changes in him? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, he laughs, like he's so happy now. And that was his main thing, was like, we went from this really scared, anxiety filled kid to somebody who is cracking jokes and laughing, and it just felt like it freed him up so much that he was able to finally relax and just kind of be himself, and he's silly and he's goofy and he's funny and he has a great personality. But all of that was shut down when he just was experiencing high levels of anxiety constantly throughout the day. So yes, there was huge changes. I said he had separation anxiety for a long time. We were probably about 3 months in, so not even that long. And he agreed to do a drop-off forest school twice a week for 6 hours a day. And I had been asking him if he wanted to do this forest school for the previous 2 years. Anytime I would bring it up, it was immediate panic, like, it's drop off. I'm not going. It's 6 hours of drop off. And it was just this, I was like, but you have friends there. Like, it's all the things that you love to do. And it was just an immediate no. And so then I asked him if he'd want to do it. It had been a couple months that he'd been on the protocol, and he was like, can we go look at it first? And I was like, what?
Let's go.
Yeah, yes, absolutely we can. So we went to look at it, and I was, we all went. My husband came, and he, met the people, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I was just like, what? So I mean, maybe for most parents that doesn't seem like a big deal, but for somebody who would never leave your side to now be being dropped off twice a week for 6 hours a day, 30 minutes away. I mean, it was a huge deal.
Oh, it's 30 minutes away.
It was 30 minutes away.
Fantastic.
So he knew that I wasn't going to be right there. I mean, this was a big thing. Any groups, anything, it's like, where are you going to be? Like, I had to be right there within eye distance, or he wouldn't do it.
Right.
So that was a big deal. And then as far as like ticks go, by this point, he had been doing like a constant head shake. He would do this thing with his neck, and he would, it would hurt. He would pull a neck muscle, and then he'd cry because his neck would be so stiff. And he would, lots of like, lots of these humming things, of these eye blinking and looking to the side. And, there was all kinds of things were going on at this point. And it had been going on for about a year and 4 months, because before getting in touch with you, it was September of 2023. I got a stomach bug, and then he got a stomach bug, and his ticks skyrocketed, and I was never able to get them under control again.
So he had a 1.5 year flare up prior
Yes.
to starting BioNexus. Wow.
Yes.
Right.
So lots of ticks, I mean, and the humming was constant. If he was, unless he was talking, would hum. And then when we go around his friends, he was 8 at that time, and we would meet up with friends. And so when he was around them, he would try not to hum, because it was embarrassing. But then it just seemed like if he was trying not to do it, then the eye stuff would come out, or he was trying to, I don't know really how it all works. But when we were at home and he felt like safe to do all the things that his body needed to do, there was a lot of it. So yeah, so that all calmed down. That calmed down so much for yeah, probably I would say the ticks really within about 6 months. 6 months was when I really was able to kind of look back and be like, wow, we've actually come quite a long way in, just a short amount of time. So yeah, and now here we are today, and he's still not this kid that's like, yeah, go drop me off anywhere, I don't care. See, he's not that kid. But when I'm like, hey, do you want to go do this? He's like, there's that panic isn't there anymore.
He
I mean, he's
thinks
still
about it.
yeah, like he'll think
Right.
about it, and he'll be okay with doing things. If I'm like, I do want you to do this, I think you're gonna have fun, then he'll do it. It'll be fine. But that level of panic is gone. He doesn't ask where I am anymore. He started asking, like, if we need bottled water, then he'll be like, oh, I'll go across the street by myself to the shop and get it. Like he'll yeah. Yeah, it's, like looking back and thinking back about where we were just a year ago and where we are today.
Oh,
I think what has been so helpful too is, like, when you were explaining the ticks, because Ollie would ask me, like, why do I do this? He was aware. We didn't pretend like he wasn't doing it, but I wouldn't, be like, why are you doing this? He would tell me, my body just has to do it. And so he would say too, some of them would hurt, so he didn't want to do these, because a lot of them, sometimes he would do this like stomach crunch over and over, and he had done thousands of crunches a day, and then he'd cry because his muscles were so sore, or he'd pull a neck, or he was just embarrassed by some of them. So he, in the beginning, when he'd ask, like, why do I do this? It was just like, I don't know. But then after talking to you, and you would explain like the basal ganglia, and also with the anxiety, you would talk about the amygdala and just how the brain and stuff works. I could go back to him and, kind of just tell him, like, this isn't you. Like, you are not, a super scared kid. You are not, this isn't you. This is just like this is like viruses, bacteria, mold, these things, when they get into our bodies, they can kind of go haywire. And so that's what we want to do, is we just want to treat these things. And just being able to kind of give him an explanation so he can understand, and then also for me to understand what's going on, it's just been such a blessing. Such a blessing. So thank you.
oh, it's been a blessing for me as well. One last question for you, Carrie. Has he gotten ill, and how has that flare-up scenario been? Like he used to, he used to go into this giant flare-up for months.
Yes.
What is that experience?
So he, after that, when he turned 4 and he had that really high fever of 104, it was 40 degrees Celsius. He did not, he went a whole, over a year without having any fever after that. But when he would get ill, it was always just like a very low temperature and then a big flare. So after we started the protocol, we started like the big one in March. And then in April, he got sick for the first time with like where he felt bad. Because before it was like his, he might get sick, but he was still okay in himself. This was his first like big fever. And it was, almost 100. It was like 103.5, which that was the highest fever he had in years. And had that for about 2 days. But there was no flare after that, which I thought was crazy because, I don't know, like everything had calmed down and then he got sick and then nothing really flared back up. And since then, I mean, let's see, over this last year, he's gotten sick. I think he's had, maybe 2 illnesses since then. Nothing major, but also no flares from that. I'm always like, when he gets sick, I'm always like, oh, because even just a cold, before, even just having a cold would still flare up his tics and stuff.
Set him off.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right. So that is huge. One thing that
yes.
I've noticed, one thing that I've heard from many parents around the world is, and I've seen myself, of course, because BioNexus Herbal Protocol was invented for my son.
Oh,
So, right, that's how, I came into
yeah.
this whole herbal profession as such. Now, when you treat Lyme disease and other triggers that we find in children, and we also found in Ollie, with a customized herbal protocol, we rarely see any regression,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So the gains are sustained.
Mhm.
And one thing, as you mentioned with Ollie, was after years of being immune suppressed, as in no fevers, he got a nice, robust fever,
Yeah.
no flare-ups, and that is the dream of every
Yes.
Pandas family.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we are there with Ollie now, and it's just, and honestly, Carrie, you've been so thorough and articulate for this
Mm.
entire podcast today, and it's just fantastic. I mean, you're like basal ganglia and amygdala. I'm
Oh,
impressed. You've done your research, and you
oh,
were listening. You were
yeah.
listening to what I was saying and explaining, and explaining to you, and you actually understood
Yes. Oh,
the
those
autoimmune process.
appointments with you are so life-giving. Like I always come back to my husband and I'm like, oh, the cells, the outside of the cell wall mimics like our own tissues. So then like the basal ganglia gets attacked. I don't know. I did it better after I had just come off a call with you. But my husband was like, I don't know what any of this means.
Yes, ma'am.
He's like, we have
Whatever you
answers.
say, right? Fantastic,
Um,
fantastic. I think this is going to be so inspirational and helpful to moms watching. Usually we get anywhere. I mean, it's a teeny tiny channel, right, for educational purposes, and we usually get like anywhere from 500 to 2,000 views. We don't know. So
ah,
that's how many families are being helped
oh, wow.
find answers. So
Yeah.
it's just, so thank you so much for being here today for
No,
the
thank
podcast.
you. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. Honestly, it is just, this has been the best decision that I've made was choosing you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing as well. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye, Dr. Dashore.
Thank you, Carrie. Take good care.
Bye.
Bye.